There's a moment that happens quietly, usually when you're alone. You've just finished something, maybe a project at work, maybe a conversation, maybe just a simple task you've done 1,000 times before. And instead of feeling relief or satisfaction, there's this voice that immediately whispers, "It could have been better." Not as celebration, not as motivation, but as condemnation. You replay every small mistake, every awkward pause, every detail that wasn't quite right. And somehow, no matter how much you accomplished, it never feels like enough. This is the invisible prison of perfectionism. It doesn't announce itself with grand declarations or obvious signs. It hides behind ambition, behind work ethic, behind the smile you wear when someone compliments you while your mind is already cataloguing everything you did wrong. Because to you, good isn't good enough. Excellence isn't excellent enough. And even when you reach the goal, the finish line moves backward, revealing new flaws you somehow missed before. Most people think perfectionism is about wanting things to be perfect. Perfectionism is about never being able to see yourself as enough, regardless of what you achieve. It's the exhausting loop of trying to earn worth through flawlessness, only to discover that worth can never be earned that way, because the standard isn't external. It lives inside you, constantly raising the bar, constantly whispering that you're falling short. Let me show you where this begins. Often in childhood, in moments so subtle you might not even remember them. Maybe you brought home a test with 95% and your parent asked about the missing 5%, not with cruelty, maybe even with curiosity, but the message landed the same. Success was expected. Failure, even partial failure, required explanation. They were performances you had to earn again and again. Or maybe it wasn't your parents at all. Maybe it was the classroom where the smart kids got praised and the struggling ones got ignored. Maybe it was siblings who seemed to do everything effortlessly while you had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. Maybe it was just the quiet observation that the world rewards certain people and overlooks others. And somewhere in your young mind, you made a decision. If I'm perfect, I'll be safe. If I'm flawless, I'll be loved. If I never make mistakes, I'll finally be enough. That child is still inside you, still trying, still hoping that this time, if you just get it right, the anxiety will finally stop. But here's what that child doesn't know yet. Perfectionism isn't protection. It's punishment. It's the mind's attempt to control an uncontrollable world by controlling yourself so rigidly that there's no room left to breathe. Psychologically, perfectionism is rooted in something called conditional self-worth. It means your value as a person feels tied to your performance, your achievements. When you succeed, you feel temporarily okay, but the relief never lasts because the next challenge is already waiting. When you fail, even slightly, it doesn't feel like a mistake. It feels like proof of something deeply wrong with who you are. This creates a devastating cycle. You set unrealistic expectations because anything less feels like giving up. You work yourself into exhaustion trying to meet them. You achieve something remarkable but immediately dismiss it because it wasn't perfect. And then you set even higher standards next time, convinced that if you just try harder, the feeling of not enough will finally go away. But it never does, because the problem isn't your performance. The problem is that you're asking your achievements to do something they were never meant to do. You're asking them to prove your worth. And here's the cruelest part. Perfectionism disguises itself as ambition. Society celebrates it, rewards it, calls it drive or dedication, or strong work ethic. So you wear your exhaustion like a badge of honor. You tell people you're just detail-oriented, or I have high standards for myself. And everyone nods approvingly because we live in a culture that worships productivity and mistakes perfectionism for excellence. But perfectionism and excellence are not the same thing. Perfectionism is doing your best and believing it's still not good enough. Excellence allows for growth, for mistakes, for being human. Perfectionism demands flawlessness and punishes you when you inevitably fall short. One is sustainable, the other is slowly killing you. You can see it in your body, the tension you carry in your shoulders, the way your stomach tightens when someone criticizes you, the insomnia that comes from replaying conversations and wondering what you should have said differently. Perfectionism doesn't just live in your thoughts. It lives in your nervous system, in nervous system RFI, keeping you in a constant state of alert, scanning for mistakes, preparing for judgment, never allowing you to fully rest. Researchers have found that perfectionism is strongly linked to anxiety, depression, and even physical health problems. Because when your worth feels conditional, when you believe you have to earn your right to exist through flawless performance, your body never truly feels safe. It stays in survival mode, pumping stress hormones, keeping you vigilant, waiting for the next moment you'll be exposed as not good enough. And the tragedy is that perfectionism often begins as an attempt to avoid pain. You thought if you were perfect, people wouldn't criticize you, wouldn't leave you, wouldn't hurt you. But perfectionism itself becomes the source of the deepest pain, because no matter how hard you try, perfection is impossible. And every day you chase it, you're essentially telling yourself that who you are right now, flawed and human and trying, is not acceptable. Think about how this shows up in relationships. You overthink every text message, analyzing tone and word choice, terrified of saying something wrong. You apologize constantly, even for things that don't need apology, because you're always assuming you've done something to upset someone. You struggle to accept compliments because your mind immediately lists all the ways you don't deserve them, and you have trouble being vulnerable because vulnerability means showing your imperfections, and imperfections feel dangerous. So you perform. You present the most polished version of yourself, the one that never struggles, never doubts, never needs help, and people might admire you for your competence, your reliability, your seeming confidence, but they don't really know you. Because the real you, the one who's tired and scared and desperately trying to hold it all together, that version stays hidden. And the loneliness of that, the exhaustion of never being able to let your guard down. In work, perfectionism can look like success. You meet every deadline, exceed every expectation, produce high-quality results, but internally, you're drowning. You procrastinate because starting feels overwhelming when the standard is flawlessness, or you work yourself into burnout, staying up late, skipping meals, sacrificing everything else in your life because the project has to be perfect. And even when you succeed, there's no joy in it. Just relief that you didn't fail, followed immediately by anxiety about the next task. This is what psychologists call maladaptive perfectionism. It's the kind that doesn't drive you toward growth, but towards self-destruction. It's the voice that says one mistake means total failure, that anything less than the best is worthless, that your value as a human being is measured by your output. And that voice, no matter how much you achieve, will never be satisfied. Because it's not actually about achievement, it's about an unhealed wound that keeps demanding impossible standards as proof that you deserve to exist. But here's what you need to understand. That wound, that deep belief that you're not enough, it didn't come from you. It was planted by experiences that taught you love and acceptance were conditional, by a world that often values what you do more than who you are, by moments when you felt invisible unless you were exceptional, and you internalized that message so deeply that now you carry it everywhere, applying it to everything, never questioning whether it's actually true. The truth is this: your worth is not conditional. It never was. You don't have to earn the right to be loved, to be seen, to take up space in this world. You are enough, not because of what you achieve, but because you exist. That might sound like empty words right now, especially if you've spent your entire life believing the opposite. But it's the foundation of healing, the understanding that worth is inherent, not earned. Healing from perfectionism doesn't mean lowering your standards or becoming lazy. It means learning the difference between striving and suffering. It means setting goals because they matter to you, not because you're trying to prove something. It means allowing yourself to be a beginner, to make mistakes. And most difficult of all, it means sitting with the discomfort of not being exceptional and realizing that your value doesn't disappear when you're ordinary. This is terrifying for perfectionists, because if your worth isn't tied to your achievements, if you can't earn love through flawlessness, then what? What happens if you're just human, just average, just trying your best? The fear is that you'll be abandoned, rejected, forgotten. But the reality, the one you've been too afraid to test, is that most people don't love you because you're perfect. They love you despite your imperfections. Or more accurately, they love you, including your imperfections, because that's what makes you real. Think about the people you love most. Do you love them because they're perfect? Or do you love them for their quirks, their vulnerabilities, their humanity? Chances are, the things you cherish most about them are the imperfect parts. They deepen it, because perfection is cold, distant, untouchable. So why do you demand from yourself what you would never demand from the people you love? Why do you hold yourself to standards that, if someone else tried to impose them on you, you'd recognize as cruel? This is the question that begins to crack open the prison of perfectionism. Not through achieving more, but through questioning the very foundation of why you're trying so hard in the first place. And slowly, painfully, you might begin to see it. That the voice demanding perfection isn't your voice. It's an echo of old fears, old wounds, old messages that were never true to begin with. It's the internalized critic that learned to speak in your parents' tone, your teacher's tone, society's tone. The real you, beneath all that pressure and performance, is just a person trying to be okay in a world that often feels unsafe. What would it be like to speak to yourself the way you'd speak to a frightened child? Not with demands or criticism, but with gentleness, with the understanding that you're doing your best, that your best is enough, that mistakes don't make you broken. This is the practice of self-compassion, and for perfectionists, it's revolutionary. The moment you start treating yourself with kindness, the whole system begins to collapse. It won't happen overnight. You'll still catch yourself spiraling into self-criticism, still feel that familiar anxiety when something isn't perfect. But each time you notice it, each time you gently redirect yourself back to compassion, you're rewiring your brain. You're teaching your nervous system that safety doesn't require perfection, that you can make mistakes and still be worthy, that your value isn't something you have to earn every single day. And gradually, something starts to shift. Tasks that used to paralyze you with fear of failure become manageable because the stakes feel lower. Relationships deepen because you're letting people see the real you, not just the polished version. Joy becomes possible again because you're not constantly monitoring yourself for flaws. You start to breathe more deeply, sleep more soundly, exist more fully. This doesn't mean you stop caring about quality or stop trying to do well. It means you stop equating your performance with your humanity. You can still work hard, still create beautiful things, still push yourself to grow, but now it comes from inspiration rather than desperation, from genuine desire rather than fear. And when you stumble, when things don't go as planned, when you're not perfect, you don't collapse into shame. Because here's the secret perfectionism never wanted you to know. You are already enough, not the future version of you who finally gets everything right, not the imaginary version who never makes mistakes, but you, right now, with all your flaws and fears and fumbling attempts, you are enough. You always have been. And the only thing that needs to be perfect is your willingness to finally believe that. The child inside you who learned that love was conditional is still waiting to hear this. That they are loved not for what they do, but for who they are. And maybe, after all these years of chasing an impossible standard, you can finally give yourself that permission to be imperfect, to be human, to be enough. This is where healing lives, not in finally achieving perfection, but in releasing the need for it. Not in becoming flawless, but in accepting that flaws are part of being alive, but in recognizing the worth that was always there, waiting quietly beneath all the striving and suffering. Let me tell you something about the way perfectionism moves through a life. It's not loud or obvious. It's the quiet erosion of joy, the slow disappearance of spontaneity, the gradual shrinking of the space where you allow yourself to just exist. You stop dancing because you're not good enough. You stop singing because someone might hear. You stop creating, playing, trying new things because the gap between where you are and where you think you should be feels unbearable. This is what perfectionism steals from you. Not just peace or rest, but the ability to be a beginner. Because when everything has to be perfect, nothing can be new. And without newness, without the permission to not know, to fumble, to figure things out as you go, life becomes incredibly small. You stay in your lane, doing only what you already know you can do well, and the world of possibility that exists beyond that narrow path remains forever unexplored. Think about children. Watch how freely they move through the world. They fall down and get back up without shame. They sing off-key with complete confidence. They create art that makes no sense and display it proudly. Not because they're naive, but because they haven't yet learned that their worth depends on their performance. They haven't internalized the lie that mistakes are evidence of inadequacy. They're just being, just doing, just alive in the moment without the constant weight of self-judgment. You used to be that child. Before the world taught you to be careful, to monitor yourself, to measure your worth against impossible standards. There was a version of you who tried things just because they seemed interesting, who spoke without rehearsing every word, who existed without constant self-evaluation. They're still inside you, buried beneath years of learned perfectionism, waiting for permission to come back out. But perfectionism built walls around that child, walls made of fear and shame and the desperate need for control, because somewhere along the way, you learned that the world isn't always safe, that people can hurt you, that vulnerability can be weaponized. So you decided that if you could just be perfect enough, you could protect yourself from that pain. If you never gave anyone a reason to criticize you, they couldn't hurt you. If you were flawless, you'd be invincible, except it didn't work that way. Because perfection isn't armor, it's a cage, and inside that cage, you're still the same person with the same fears, but now you're also exhausted from the constant performance. You're isolated because no one really knows you. You're anxious because maintaining the illusion of perfection requires constant vigilance. And you're lonely in a way that's hard to explain because even when you're surrounded by people who admire you, you know they're only seeing the mask. Here's what makes perfectionism so insidious. It promises safety, but delivers prison. It promises worthiness, but delivers shame. It promises that if you just try hard enough, you'll finally feel okay. But the truth is that no amount of achievement will ever fill the hole that perfectionism creates. Because the hole isn't about what you lack. It's about the lie you believe. The lie that says you have to earn your right to be here. And that lie permeates everything. It shows up in how you talk to yourself, the harsh internal dialogue that would horrify you if you heard someone speaking that way to another person. It shows up in how you handle mistakes, turning minor errors into catastrophic evidence of your inadequacy. It shows up in how you receive love, always suspecting that if people really knew you, they'd leave. Because deep down, perfectionism whispers that the real you isn't good enough, and only the perfect version deserves love. But here's the paradox that perfectionism can never resolve. The more perfect you try to be, the more disconnected you become from yourself. Because perfection requires that you hide, edit, and suppress everything that doesn't fit the ideal image. Your anger, your sadness, your confusion, your needs, all of it has to be managed, controlled, kept out of sight. It's a carefully constructed performance that exhausts you to maintain. Think about the last time you felt truly relaxed, truly yourself. Chances are it wasn't in a situation where you were trying to impress anyone or prove anything. It was probably a moment where you forgot to monitor yourself, where you laughed too loud or said something silly or let your guard down completely. Those moments feel like relief because they are relief. Brief escapes from the constant pressure of having to be perfect. But for many perfectionists, those moments are rare and fleeting, quickly followed by shame for letting the mask slip. The exhaustion of perfectionism isn't just mental. It's physical, emotional, spiritual. Your body stays tense, always ready for criticism, always braced for judgment. Your emotions become muted because feeling too much might lead to losing control. And spiritually, you lose touch with the deeper questions of meaning and purpose because you're so consumed with the surface-level question of whether you're good enough. Life becomes about management rather than experience, about control rather than connection. Psychologists have identified different types of perfectionism, but they all share a common thread. Self-oriented perfectionism is when you hold yourself to impossibly high standards. Other-oriented perfectionism is when you demand perfection from those around you. And socially prescribed perfectionism is when you believe that others expect perfection from you. But regardless of the type, the underlying belief is the same. That human value is conditional, that worth must be earned, that imperfection equals unworthiness. And this belief system is reinforced everywhere you look. Social media shows you everyone's highlight reels, making it seem like everyone else has it all together. Work culture glorifies those who sacrifice everything for their careers. Education systems often reward perfection over curiosity. Even well-meaning parents and teachers sometimes inadvertently send the message that love and approval are tied to achievement. So it's no wonder that perfectionism has become an epidemic, especially among younger generations who've grown up in this pressure cooker of constant comparison and performance. But here's what research tells us. Perfectionism is getting worse, not better. Studies tracking perfectionism levels across decades show significant increases, particularly in self-oriented and socially prescribed perfectionism. More people than ever before report feeling like they have to be perfect to be acceptable. And the mental health consequences are staggering. Rates of anxiety, depression, eating disorders, and suicide have all been linked to rising perfectionism. This isn't just about individual struggles, it's about a culture that's making people sick with impossible standards. Yet even knowing all this, letting go of perfectionism feels terrifying. Because if you're not perfect, then what? If you stop trying to control every detail, if you allow yourself to be messy and imperfect and human, what happens then? The fear is that everything will fall apart, that you'll become lazy or mediocre, that people will finally see that you're not actually as capable as they thought. But this fear is the voice of perfectionism itself, the last desperate attempt to keep you trapped. The truth is very different. When you start releasing perfectionism, when you begin allowing yourself to be imperfect, you don't fall apart. You come together. The energy you are spending on constant self-monitoring becomes available for actual living. The mental space occupied by self-criticism opens up for creativity, curiosity, connection, and the terror you felt about being exposed as imperfect gradually transforms into the relief of finally being real. This transformation doesn't happen through willpower or by simply deciding to care less. It happens through a slow, patient process of reparenting yourself, of learning to speak to yourself with the kindness you deserved as a child but may not have received, of catching yourself in moments of harsh self-judgment and consciously choosing a gentler response, of practicing self-compassion not as a one-time exercise but as a daily, moment-by-moment practice. Self-compassion researcher Kristen Neff identifies 3 components of self-compassion: self-kindness instead of self-judgment, common humanity instead of isolation, and mindfulness instead of over-identification with difficult emotions. For perfectionists, all 3 are revolutionary. Self-kindness means treating yourself with the same care you'd offer a good friend. Common humanity means recognizing that imperfection and struggle are part of being human, not evidence that you're uniquely flawed. And mindfulness means observing your thoughts and feelings without getting completely lost in them. But even understanding these concepts intellectually doesn't automatically translate into being able to practice them, because perfectionism has deep roots, often reaching back to early childhood experiences that shaped how you see yourself. Maybe you grew up in a home where love felt conditional, where affection was granted for achievements but withdrawn for mistakes. Maybe you experienced trauma and learned that control, even the impossible control of being perfect, felt safer than vulnerability. Maybe you were praised so much for being the good kid, the smart kid, the responsible one, that your entire identity became wrapped up in that role. Whatever the origin, the work of healing isn't about analyzing the past endlessly. It's about recognizing how those early experiences created patterns that no longer serve you, and then consciously, patiently, creating new patterns. It's about noticing when you're speaking to yourself in your critical parent's voice, and choosing instead to speak in the voice of the parent you needed. It's about catching yourself setting impossible standards and gently lowering them to something actually achievable. It's about celebrating small victories instead of dismissing them and moving immediately to the next challenge. And it's about grieving. Because letting go of perfectionism means grieving the fantasy that if you were just good enough, everything would be okay. It means grieving the time you lost to constant striving and self-criticism. It means grieving the relationships you kept at arm's length because you were too afraid to be vulnerable. This grief is real and necessary. You can't heal what you don't acknowledge. And you can't move forward while still clinging to the false promise that perfection will save you. There will be moments in this process where it feels like you're regressing, where the old patterns resurface with full force. You'll catch yourself spiraling into self-criticism after a minor mistake, or you'll find yourself unable to start a project because the fear of imperfection feels overwhelming. They're just the reality of healing from something that's been with you for so long. The difference now is that you can recognize what's happening and choose a different response, even if that response is simply acknowledging the struggle with kindness. Some days, self-compassion will feel natural and easy. Other days, it will feel impossible, like you're lying to yourself or letting yourself off the hook for genuine mistakes. This is normal. Perfectionism doesn't release its grip quietly. It fights back with every tool it has, trying to convince you that you need it, that without it you'll fail, that self-compassion is just laziness in disguise. But each time you choose compassion anyway, each time you treat yourself with gentleness, even when it feels wrong, you're rewiring decades of conditioning. Think about what becomes possible when you're no longer controlled by perfectionism. You can try new things without needing to be immediately good at them. You can have conversations without rehearsing every word. You can create art, write, build, explore, purely for the joy of it rather than the outcome. You can rest without guilt. You can make mistakes without your world collapsing. You can ask for help without feeling weak. You can be loved not despite your imperfections, but with them, as a whole person, rather than a carefully curated performance. This is what freedom looks like. Not the absence of standards or the abandonment of growth, but the ability to pursue excellence without tying your worth to the outcome. It's working hard on things that matter to you because they matter, not because you're trying to prove something. It's setting boundaries and saying no without guilt because you understand that you can't do everything perfectly, so you'd rather do fewer things well and with presence. It's being gentle with yourself on the days when everything feels hard, because you know that struggling doesn't mean you're failing at life. And maybe most importantly, it's building genuine connections with people who see you, really see you, in all your messy humanity, and love you not despite it but because of it. Because the version of you that's trying so hard to be perfect is exhausted and lonely. But the version of you that's willing to be real, vulnerable, imperfect, that version can actually connect. That version can be known. That version can experience the kind of love that doesn't feel conditional or fragile, but solid and true. The people who will love the real you aren't looking for perfection. They're looking for authenticity. They want someone who's present, not distracted by constant self-monitoring. Someone who can laugh at themselves when things go wrong. Someone who admits when they don't have all the answers. Someone who's willing to be seen in their struggles, not just their successes. These are the connections that nourish your soul, and they're impossible to build while you're hiding behind the mask of perfectionism. So the question isn't whether you can let go of perfectionism. The question is whether you're ready to. Because letting go means facing the fear that's been driving you all this time, the fear that you're not enough, the fear that without your achievements, you're nothing. These fears feel enormous, but they're just that, fears. What if those beliefs are wrong? What if your worth isn't something you have to earn? What if you've always been enough, even in your worst moments, even in your biggest failures, even when you felt most inadequate? What if the only thing standing between you and peace is the willingness to believe that maybe, just maybe, you don't have to be perfect to deserve love? This is the invitation that healing offers, not to become someone different, but to come home to who you've always been beneath the performance. To remember that before you learned to tie your worth to your achievements, you were just a child who existed freely, who made mistakes without shame, who loved and was loved simply for being alive. That child is still in there, waiting, and they don't need you to be perfect. They just need you to finally, at long last, be kind. And maybe that's the most perfect thing of all. The realization that you were never broken. You were just trying to fix something that didn't need fixing. You were just trying to earn something that was already yours. And now, finally, you can stop running. You can stop performing. You can stop demanding the impossible from yourself. You can just be. Imperfect, flawed, human. And finally, beautifully, enough.